So good evening, everyone. So again, welcome to another Call Family Worship, where we where we are currently reading from this book, Westminster Catechism. It's a commentary by Johannes Vos. So today we will be reading from Chapter 13, God's Will Expressed in Our Duty to Others. Question 142. It is a continuation of the eighth commandment. The eighth commandment, which is thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not steal. So I'll be asking my son Kyler to read for us question 142.
What are the sins forgiven in the eighth commandment? The sins forgiven in the eighth commandment besides the neglect of the duties required are theft, robbery, and stealing, and receiving anything that is stolen, fraudulent dealing, false written measures, removing landmarks, injustice, and unfaithfulness in contract between man and woman, or in matters of trust, oppression, extortion, issuing bribery, excessive costs, unjust indulgence, and take other nations and grossly becoming units, and hands the price. Unlawful callings and all other unjust or sinful works. If they get in of the home of a man that belongs to them, or of any ourselves, covetousness, in order prizing and affecting worldly goods, distrustful and distracting cares and studies, and keeping reason and acting at the prosperity of others, and likewise idleness, prodigality, misfortune, and all other virtues, whereby we do unto and prejudice our own outwardly, and defrauding ourselves of true use and comfort that is which God hath given us.
Okay. So, for tonight, we'll be only tackling one question, question 142. So, what are the sins forbidden in the eighth commandment? So, it is, besides the neglect of duty required, besides the neglect of the duties required are theft, robbery, man-stealing, and receiving anything that is stolen. Fraudulent dealing, false weights or measures, removing landmarks, injustice, and unfaithfulness in contracts between man and man or in matters of trust, oppression, extortion, usury, bribery, vexations, lawsuits, unjust enclosures, and depopulations, engrossing commodities to enhance the price, unlawful callings, and all other unjust and sinful ways of lacking or withholding from our neighbor what belongs to him, or enriching ourselves, covetousness, and inordinate prizing, and affecting worldly goods, distrustful and distracting cares, and studies in getting, keeping, and using them, envying at the prosperity of others, as likewise idleness, prodigality, wasteful gaming, and all other ways whereby we do unduly prejudice our own outward estate and defrauding ourselves of the due use and comfort of that estate which God had given us. James 2:15 to 16. 1 John 3:17 tells us that the neglect of duties enjoined in the eighth commandment. Ephesians 4:28. Psalm 62 verse 10. 1 Timothy chapter 1 verse 10 tells us of the sinfulness of theft, robbery, and man-stealing. Proverbs 29:24, Psalm 50 verse 18, tells us of knowingly to receive stolen goods is to become a party to the theft. 1 Thessalonians 4:6, Proverbs 11:1, Proverbs 20:10, Amos 8:5, fraudulent dealing and the use of false weights and measures is sinful. Deuteronomy 19:14, Proverbs 23:10, to remove landmarks by private action is contrary to the 8th commandment, being a form of stealing. Psalm 37:21, Luke 16:10 to 12 tells us that dishonesty, injustice, and unfaithfulness in fulfilling contracts or matters of trust are sinful. Leviticus 25:17, Matthew 23:25, Ezekiel 22:12, Ezekiel 22:29, Psalm 15:5, all forms of oppression or taking advantage of the helplessness of others for our own profit are forbidden. Job 15:34, Amos 5:12, 1 Samuel 8:3, Psalms 26:10, Isaiah 35:15 tells us that bribery, being essentially dishonest and unjust, is always wrong. 1 Corinthians 6:6-8, Proverbs 3:29 to 30, unjust and unnecessary lawsuits constitute a violation of the 8th commandment. Isaiah 5:3, Micah 2:2, Proverbs 11:26, the attempt to establish monopolies of the means of human subsistence is wicked. Acts 19:19, Acts 24:25, all occupations which are in and of themselves unlawful are contrary to the 8th commandment. Job 20:19, James 5:4, Proverbs 21:6, all ways of enriching ourselves by taking or withholding from others is what is rightly theirs are sinful. Luke 12:15, 1 Timothy 6:5, Colossians 3:2, Proverbs 23:5, Psalm 62:10, Matthew 6:25, Matthew 6:31, Matthew 6:34, and Ecclesiastes 5:12 tells us that all wrong attitudes toward material wealth are forbidden by the 8th commandment. Psalms 73:3, Psalms 37:1, Psalms 37:7. It is wrong to envy the material property of others. 2 Thessalonians 3:11, Proverbs 18:9, Proverbs 21:17, Proverbs 23:20-21, Proverbs 28:19, Ecclesiastes 4:8, Ecclesiastes 6:2, 1 Timothy chapter 5:8, all laziness, idleness, wastefulness, and carelessness concerning and acquiring, retaining, and expending of material wealth are sinful. What are the common sins which are obviously forbidden by the 8th commandment? Theft, robbery, burglary, larceny, embezzlement, receiving stolen goods, using or tolerating unjust weights and measures, and the like, which are so easily understood and so clearly recognized as wrong. That extended comment on them would be superfluous. These sins are shown to be wrong, not only in the Bible, but also God's natural revelation. Instead of taking time to detailed discussion of these obvious forms of dishonesty, we shall focus on the less easily recognized forms. So what is the meaning of man stealing. This includes kidnapping for ransom, stealing human beings for slavery, or to be sold to slavery. Wicked modern form of slavery, forced labor, which has existed in a totalitarian countries such as Soviet Union, Russia, by which vast numbers of human beings on one pretext or another are deprived of their liberty and compelled to pass their days in a miserable existence without comfort or hope, working for the state. How does modern advertising violate the law of God? Modern advertising is so permeated with dishonesty that we may wonder, how can a Christian participate in some of its common forms? We listen to a radio broadcast and hear a familiar voice telling us all the reasons why a certain brand of coffee, macaroni, or aspirin is the best of the market, superior to other brands, and the most for our money, characterized by extra advantages and special features. And then 2 hours later, we hear the same familiar voice telling us the reasons why another brand of coffee, macaroni, or aspirin is the kind that we should buy and use with confidence. Of course, the broadcaster is only reading a script prepared for him by the advertisers. But the whole process is so obviously shot through which exaggeration, insincerity, and half-truth that the listener becomes hardened to this sort of things and does not take any of it at face value. Some extravagant type of overstatement is prevalent in magazines, newspaper advertising. In America, it would seem a thing can hardly be offered to the public as good and worth the price. It must be termed super, colossal, magnificent, marvelous, etc. Of course, there are advertising claims that are downright false. But what is common is not outright fraud, but exaggeration, half-truth, and subtly misleading statements. All advertising that is calculated to produce any other impression to the public's mind than that of strict, objective truth concerning the qualities and value of what is offered for sale is dishonest and therefore sinful. So when a common brand of aspirin is advertised with a statement repeatedly interminably that no other aspirin is purer and gives faster relief, the impression is created that this brand is purer or faster than others. Whereas the real truth is that aspirin is aspirin. Being controlled by the FDA and among legal sold brands of aspirin, one brand is as pure and as speedy as another. No doubt, many Christian people are connected in one way or another with such dishonest advertising practices. They should consider seriously whether their occupation involves violation of the moral law. There is, of course, legitimate field of advertising. Number one, it will tell you the real truth about what is offered for sale, avoiding exaggeration and deception. Number two, it will not try to create impression that the product is better than other competitors are offering, unless it really is as shown by fairly conducted tests. Number three, it will not put forth imaginary claims which take advantage of the credulity of the public, such as that a brand of toothpaste is better than others because it contains special ingredient which is a high-sounding name, but is unknown to the science of chemistry. Or that the flavor of the brand of coffee is enhanced by a special secret process known only to the firm that offers it for sale. Radio, newspaper, and magazine advertising is tremendous business all over the world. But it is to be feared that its ethical standards are far from that of the Bible. To judge the present day advertising, we must be a nation of deceivers and deceived, or to state it less nicely, of liars and suckers. We should think seriously of the relation of this phase of the contemporary life of the law of God. What does the Catechism mean of unjust enclosure and depopulation? By unjust enclosure, the Catechism refers to the practice which at one time existed in England, whereby common land owned by the lord of the manor, but which other persons had a legal right of to use the pasturage, would be enclosed or fenced in purpose of agriculture. Such enclosures would be unjust if the rights of those who are entitled to use the common land were disregarded. In the 18th and 19th centuries, laws were enacted providing the enclosures on an equitable basis for all parties concerned when more land was needed to raise crops. By depopulation, the Catechism means that the practice of buying up large tracts of land to form great estate and removing the tenants who had been living on it, a form of injustice known in the Old Testament times and condemned in Isaiah 5 verse 8 and Micah 2 verse 2. So what does the Catechism says about monopolies and commodities? Monopolies of commodities, I mean. The Catechism states that it is an engrossing commodities to enhance the price, is a violation of the 8th commandment, and therefore sinful. Not every form of monopoly is necessarily wrong. Some businesses or services are natural monopolies, such as postal office, and may be best operated either by the state or a private corporations, licensed and regulated by the state. But the Catechism condemns as sinful are monopolies, the purpose of which is to raise prices by cornering the total available supply of a product. This practice eliminates competition and prevents normal functioning of the law of supply and demand. It creates artificial shortage and disappearance of the product from the market in order that those who have established monopoly can name their own price and get it because no one else has the product for sale. Such monopolies of commodities, especially necessities of life, are clearly unjust, and that is prohibited by civil legislation of many countries. The principle laid down by the Catechism does not imply that patent laws by which inventions is encouraged by the state guaranteeing the inventor of monopoly of manufacture for sale of his invention for a limited period of years. However, the common practice by which large corporations purchase patent rights from inventors not in order for manufacture of the article and offer it to the public, but in order to prevent it from being manufactured or sold by anyone, is quite another matter. It may well be that this latter practice is essentially immoral and contrary to the 8th commandment. Certainly, it frustrates the legitimate purpose of the patent laws, which is to promote progress and encourage invention when corporations take advantage of these laws to prevent progress and to keep public from enjoying the fruits of new inventions. It may be that the Christian principle require a revision of the patent laws. So what is wasteful gaming? And why is it wrong? Wasteful gaming, the Catechism denotes all forms of gambling which are inherently sinful because they involve an attempt to gain wealth without rendering an equivalent value in return. If the gambler wins, he is a thief. If he loses, he is a waster of the Lord's property. The fact that gambling involves an implied agreement to transfer money or property one way or the other, as determined by the chance of fall of dice, does not make it legitimate. A contract to do something sinful is in itself sinful. It has been well said that the gambling stands in some relation to stealing as dueling is to murder. Gambling includes slot machines, raffles, punch boards, betting, lotteries, game of chance, played for money or prizes, various forms of pools, etc. All of these are essentially immoral, and Christian people should leave them all strictly alone. Gambling is not only a sinful vice, but a fever which grows on a person until he cannot let it alone. The only safe and right course is to have nothing whatsoever to do with gambling in any form. Of course, churches and civic organizations that sponsor any kind of gambling scheme are beneath contempt. So for that, we will end question 142, which is the 8th commandment. Lord willing, we will be reading question 143, which is the 9th commandment. Okay, so let us all stand. Let us all stand as Kevin will lead us in a word of prayer.
Dear God, thank you for this Lord's Day. Thank you for this catechism. Thank you for all us taught. In Jesus' name.
Amen. Bye.